We're making this video because a lot of folks have questions about the PERT reforms, which is protecting Eugene renters in transition.
Hi, I'm Candace King. I am a renter in Ward 1 in Eugene. I'm a Taurus, mom, and community advocate, as well as I train housing navigators across Lane County and eventually the state, and also do some process analysis for service providers and property managers if they want.
My name is Kevin. I use he, him pronouns. I live over in West Eugene near Fred Meyer. That makes me a Ward 8 resident. My wife and I live here. She goes to the U of O Law School. And we've lived in Eugene for 12 years now. So I'm gonna share my screen and get started. PERT is a series of renter protections being proposed to the Eugene City Council. The PERT reforms date back to 2017 when the Housing Policy Board, that's a Eugene City Committee in partnership with Lane County, they engaged both renters and landlords in the reform process. Hours of testimony and input from stakeholders have gone into reaching what we're calling compromises. And these reforms are an equity solution meant to increase consumer protections for renters and vulnerable families. We all know there's a supply problem with housing, and these reforms are not targeted at the supply problem, even though we need to work on that. So Candace is going to talk a little bit about some changes at the application stage.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So changes at the application stage recommended by PERT include banning applications and screening fees and setting a ceiling of $10 per application per person. What that means is that a family like mine with 2 parents and, 3 kids at 1.4 would only have to pay $20 to rent a house instead of the families like mine would only have to pay $20 to rent a house instead of $60 or $80 or $90 that we paid just for one unit that we tried to rent when we were searching for housing in 2016. And again, in 2017, we submitted applications to upwards of 5 units per time, and the market's only worse now. So the next change is requiring landlords to process applications in the order received. Duh. Just don't discriminate against people. That's a very CYA moment for landlords, and it is a very assuring moment for tenants who are prospective tenants out there looking for a place to live. Prohibits landlords from including medical and educational debt in the screening process. You know, as a millennial who hasn't always had health insurance, so I've definitely incurred some medical debt, and who had to go to college to get a basic entry-level job, I definitely have debt on both fronts. And if those were counted against me or are counted against me in the rental application process, I probably would not get approved, and I make pretty decent money. It's the denial of applications because of bad credit scores. So this is a big one that is a very West Coast and East Coast issue, and a few places smattered in between. But as somebody who's lived all over this country, I've never seen credit scores be weighted so heavily in the landlord screening process. By not denying folks who have a score of less than 500 instead of the very stringent baseline that some property managers, it's sort of arbitrary and all over the place. Property managers determine what kind of screening, what kind of credit score they're looking for in the screening process. By setting a score at 500, we acknowledge that this person has a record of existence. And as long as they don't owe debt to a previous landlord or something that would prevent them from being able to pay for their housing and utilities, why should it count against them? Loosening minimum monthly gross income screening standards. So the PERT recommends that we cap income screening at 2 times the rent. Why is that? I mean, so me personally, I can see both sides of this equation from the perspective of the tenant and the perspective of the landlord. The reality is 30% is really affordable for families because everything else that you bring in for income goes to the rest of your expenses and perhaps maybe someday some savings. But it's also aspirational. That's a HUD figure that determined that that's affordable. But what we know is that the average median income for a household of 4 in Eugene is $32,000 a year. So about $2,100 a month take home. And even that is not enough to afford a 2 times rent or a 2-to-1 ratio cap on rental income, which is what we're proposing, of the average median or the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom being $1,200 a month. So if folks making $32K a year can't afford an average 2-bedroom unit in Eugene, how should we expect anybody to be able to afford any units? And then ADA units, right? We got to require a 3-day priority period for applicants with mobility needs if the unit's accessible. Why? Because people who need accessibility with their units have a much more limited array of units to choose from. And those are often people in our community who experience the most vulnerability and are at the highest risk of homelessness. So give them a little bit of a head start.
So I'm going to cover some changes that are going to happen at the move in and move out stage of the process. So the PERT reforms are going to require landlords to educate tenants about their rights under Senate Bill 608. 608 is a major change and update to the Oregon Landlord Tenant Act. And there's still a lot of confusion about it. And so part of this is to help educate folks. And so the city can actually put together a 1-page educational brochure that a landlord can print out and put as part of their leasing packet to get safe harbor on this so that they meet the requirements. We already do this with mold, mildew, and lead-based paint. So this is something that is already routinely done and is something that can be included that helps everybody know their rights. Next, we're going to try to limit the maximum move-in deposit to twice the monthly rent, not including the pet deposit. What we've seen is that deposits are a huge barrier for folks to exiting homelessness, especially if they get a Section 8 voucher, and so they're gonna have housing affordability. Oftentimes it's really, really hard to come up with the steep deposit, and it can be quite a barrier for someone to exercise their spot on the Section 8 wait list. So it's really important that we do some deposit reform. The next reform is to require landlords to itemize and photo document the property conditions at move-in and specify reasons for withholding any part of the security deposit at move-out. This is something that's going to protect both landlords and tenants. Like, we'll be able to look at what was the condition of the refrigerator upon move-in. What is the reason why someone lost their security deposit? And this is going to be very helpful. The last one is a little bit obscure. It's upon tenant request, it requires landlords to provide rental history at least once per year to the tenant without the tenant having to give notice. This is something that's really important for folks that are applying for public housing or project-based housing or other programs that have a wait list. Oftentimes they try to do the screening up front so that you're pre-approved and ready to move in. And getting that landlord rental history has been a real barrier for folks. And I've seen people be denied because their landlord hasn't provided this. So the PERT reforms are also going to fund some city services, and Candace is going to talk a little bit about that.
Just a little bit. So expanding the city housing services is necessary, and Eugene, of course, the most. Add a full-time rental housing navigator to city staff. Well, as a person who was a navigator, who now trains navigators, and well, once a navigator, always a navigator. What we like to say is, in our industry speak, is we find a way. So when housing searches and most of us renters of all income spectrums in this area know that housing searches can seem insurmountable sometimes. And for folks who really need the help, a navigator will find a way, and that is how we start to prevent the increasing homelessness in this area. Sustained funding for existing tenant hotline. SEED is awesome. It's a resource for tenants to contact a neutral party that can inform them and educate them about the legal parameters of their rental experience. And that saves landlords a lot of trouble. It saves our other organization, Oregon Law Center, a lot of trouble, and it saves tenants a lot of trouble. So fund CETA. Fund additional tenant support services such as maintaining an accessible unit list and reporting rental data. I mean, we have to have the data in order to be able to act appropriately and respond appropriately to the housing needs of this community. And one of the things that we have failed to do in the past, which we're starting to do better, is to look at the data and understand what, where, how, who, and when, and why we need the different implement different rules and strategies. Increasing the rental housing code fee from $10 a year, which property owners and managers pay annually, to cover in the cost of increasing services and code enforcement. You know, landlords do own property. They do get services from the city of Eugene as part of owning that property. And by having the limited housing market that we have and the high rents that we have, we actually increase the cost for the city of Eugene in homelessness services and other housing strategies that we have to implement. So, you know, a few more bucks a year per unit is a drop in the bucket when you get $1,200 a month for a 2-bedroom.
So one of the other things that is being asked is displacement prevention assistance. So this is something that was passed in Portland, also passed in Berkeley, and in Bellingham as well, up in Washington. And basically this says that DPA will require that any valid notice for a no-cause eviction or a steep rent increase, so that's above the Western Region Price Index, that's like the cost of living, must be accompanied by 3 months standard rent paid by the landlord to the tenant. So in 2019, no-cause evictions were out of control. They were happening all of the time. You were seeing entire buildings being no-cause evicted. And so the state stepped in and actually banned them, except for in like 4 circumstances. And markets like Portland instituted this because folks were still trying to get around and shoehorn their reason into one of those 4 reasons. And DPA actually cut that down because we know that no-cause eviction is usually a business decision. That means that someone wants to go into their unit, they want to update everything and charge more rent. And that's something that, as a landlord, you have a right to do that. What this means is that the cost of that business decision, the social cost of that, is going to be on the person who benefits from that decision. And so you have that property right, but you also have to pay so that there's a little bit of money that goes into that so that the person can find a comparable unit. So that's first, last, and deposit. And that person can, move on to the next unit. What we found is that no-cause evictions are a direct pipeline to homelessness, and this is seeking to minimize that risk and protect property owners' rights. So it's a good balance between the two, and it's a solid policy that has worked really well and has been challenged in court several times, and every single time the court comes back with like, hey, this is fair and this is great. And so it's really important that we pass displacement prevention assistance because in the Eugene market, we actually are still seeing no-cause evictions happen about 1 every single day. And over the holidays, that's Christmas and Thanksgiving, we saw 57 of these occur. And so that can be really tough during the holidays. And, this is going to tackle that. And a bunch of people have signed on, a bunch of really great community groups from labor unions to church activists that are in support of this policy because they know that it's going to make our community a little bit healthier. So I'm going to turn it over to Candace, and she's going to talk a little bit about what you can do to help us pass these important protections.
All right, thanks, Kev. Fair is fair. Let's do what's fair, right? I love your passion and really appreciate the work that you're doing on this. If you're passionate as Kevin and I am about getting these renters protection implemented in Eugene, then please sign the petition that's circulating to around social media. And if you don't know where to get it, contact Kevin.
Contact either one of us.
Contact either one of us. Yeah, reach out to either one of us. You got our number, right? And then, or you can email the city council. You can email your city council representative, or you can email the city council at large.
Yeah, there's a real good email that is mayor and city council and manager at eugene.gov, and it goes to all of them. So if you don't know who your city councilor is, just send it to that email and it'll be sure to go to the right place. The other thing that's really important is we need folks to sign up and testify at the city council. Landlords are coming out in droves saying that they do not want these protections. And it's really important that renters stand up and say, hey, you know, we represent 52% of the entire city, and that these protections are fair and reasonable and will make our town a better place to live. So there's 2 opportunities to sign up before the city council considers these measures, and that's February 28th. That's a Monday night, and you sign up at 7:30. I would get on at 7:15 just to make sure that you can sign up, and then again on March 14th at 7:15, let's say, and that's how you can take action and really help out. If you shoot me an email, kevin.croninor@gmail.com, I'll send you a list of talking points, and I'll even review your testimony if you want to write it out beforehand, so that way you can feel confident about saying the right things. So thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.